Our study today brings the story of yet another man named Shammai to an end. Sorry if that was a spoiler, but I think you'll still find some really good gems in this study. Hi, I'm Ken Godevanis, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Today we study 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 36 to 46. Thanks for joining us. Let's dig right in. A look at the Bible from a family tree or genealogy perspective has some people believing there were 20, possibly 22 different people named Shammai in the scriptures. We will look at the one who is deemed to be the most famous of the lot. This was a Benjamite of the house of Saul who stoned and cursed David at Bahurim as David was fleeing from Absalom. We came across him in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 5 to 13, and then again in chapter 19 of 2 Samuel, verses 16 to 20. And then again in this current chapter that we're studying earlier on in 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, when David, just prior to his death, tells Solomon that he, David, had sworn not to put Shammai to death with his sword for cursing him. Yet David wanted Solomon to punish him wisely, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 9. And finally, we come once more upon Shammai later in the chapter, that is in verses 36 to 46, the passage we're digging into today. Again, let's go deeper. Solomon had one more person to deal with, and so he called for Shammai. When they met, he told him to go build a house in Jerusalem and live there. And here's the kicker: never go out from there to any place. And he tells him that if he does, he can know with certainty that he will die and his blood shall be on his own head. Verse 37. Shammai agreed to the terms before God, figuring he got off easy, and went and did just as Solomon ordered. But 3 years later, 2 of his servants took off and went to the king of Gath in the land of the Philistines. When he heard about it, he got up and saddled his donkey, went to Gath, and retrieved his servants. Solomon then hears about it and orders him to appear before him. He reminded him of the terms of his punishment, and that he had agreed that they were good. Solomon couldn't understand why he would break those terms, knowing the consequences. He reminds him of all the evil he had in his heart, which he demonstrated towards David. Well, now, Shammai's own evil will return on his own head. Verse 44. So Solomon once again calls on Benaiah and commands him this time to go and kill Shammai, which Benaiah did. And then the chapter and our passage ends with this, quote, "Thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon," end of quote. We'll stop there, but we'll keep on looking deeper. You'll remember that Shammai was associated with the house of Saul and was a threat to the house of David. Remember, Saul, David, then Solomon, the current king. David therefore instructed Solomon to not let him die in peace. He couldn't deal with him himself, but he wanted Solomon to. Solomon starts off, for his own reasons, by allowing Shammai to live, but with the stipulated conditions. And we believe Shammai was grateful for that. Some speculate that when David had asked to see him at the beginning of this passage, Shammai was probably residing at a place called Bahurim, his native place. But as he was a suspicious character, Solomon condemned him henceforth to live close by in Jerusalem, on the penalty of death for going outside the gates of that city. Now, being confined to Jerusalem was a bonus. It was a most advanced place for its time, perhaps the New York of the Middle East back then. Now, while one could argue that Shammai's breaking the terms of his parole may well have been mainly a matter of neglect or forgetfulness, yet it was still criminal to neglect or forget a covenant, let alone a covenant made with the king. This was a royal covenant that was broken. And what do we make of the closing statement, the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon? What do we make of that? Well, that's an indication that unlike in David's reign or for David's reign, Solomon's throne was secured early in his term of office. In contrast to both Saul and David, Solomon eliminated his potential enemies swiftly and ruthlessly. There's also some discussion as to whether Shimei knew he was breaking his parole rules. Some argue because he saddled his own donkey, he was sneaking away in the night, hoping no one would see him, or early morning, hoping no one would see him. Well, that's possible, but I personally think it's a stretch, as he may have had some other servants left that could have done that for him. Who knows? But what are we able to glean from this passage for our lives, your life and my life today in the 21st century? Here are some thoughts. I've often wondered about people who have committed a crime and subsequently given a chance to start all over and then blow it again. Sometimes we too are guilty of that. We sin, are forgiven, and go right back to sinning the same way again. We go back into our Gath, our land of the Philistines. We, in a sense, have broken our covenant with a king, a capital king, a capital K king, rather. Well, there comes a time when we won't be given another chance. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Second, it seems that while Shimei swore in the name of God that he would keep the requirements placed on him, he did not. He wasn't even smart enough to ask Solomon for his permission to go and do what he had to do, retrieve his servants, or even to ask Solomon for his help in doing so. When we break our covenant, we still have a chance to go back to God and ask for his forgiveness, ask for his help. Sadly, many of us, because we're a stiff-necked people, don't do that. This breaking of an oath made in God's name still goes on today, as doing so means less and less to people. We only need to look at how easily politicians who have been elected renege on their promises during their campaigns, during their pleas for our votes. Third, we need to stop and reflect that while the punishment, in this case, Shimei being killed, the punishment that we see taking place sometimes in our lives and in our world is not easy to accept or hear of, we should stop and ask ourselves, is God's will and plan being fulfilled? Or his promises being kept through it all? Those of us who believe in our God as being in full control may find some solace there. Next time, we'll look at something that Solomon does that perhaps isn't so wise. Join us for that. If you like our video, please indicate so. And also, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, Digging for Scriptural Gems, I would ask you to consider doing so. Thank you. Keep on studying God's Word. Till next time.